Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. What's up, world? Good to see you.
I love it. So Brandon, I want to ask you, I want to go into the backstory just a little bit to recap for those that don't know you or don't know your story. But first, tell us where you are. Like, give us a sense of like, what does today look like for you?
I'm in my Conquer cave, so this is my home office. I work from home pretty much every single day. Didn't used to be this way. I've been in home services pretty much my whole life. So my dad had a owner operator window cleaning business that he kind of ran for 33 years throughout my entire childhood. I worked full time with him from the age of 13, 40 hours a week while I was homeschooling through high school.
Wow.
So, I've been in the thick of things. And the day I turned 18, I went out and got my own business license that was in home services and have pretty much been in the space ever since with several businesses and had failures, successes over the years, lots of pain and suffering, a lot of joyous moments. It's been a super, super fulfilling career in it for sure.
So you got this journey behind you, but how many businesses do you own today?
Today I have about 8 companies right now that I have zero day-to-day responsibilities. I either have CEOs or GMs or COOs that run those companies to where I'm not actively, involved in them.
That's incredible. I love it. So give us a little bit of a backstory, because obviously you didn't start day one with 8 companies that have multiple locations and multiple revenue streams per company, right? You had to build, your term and is your playbook, your systems, your processes to kind of get you there. But tell me how you learned that. Where did the pain start? Because a lot of these actions start from something of pain, right? We went through a process that we didn't love. So what was that pain and how did you learn it?
Well, it's funny enough. I actually did have 8 business ideas at any given point in time. That's always been kind of how I've operated. I have, 60 domain names from, wholesale wheels and tires and adjustable eyewear and Vaughn Creative Works and Tool Freaks and, all of these different business ideas. And I would consider myself to be very ADD entrepreneurially as well as in real life. I've always kind of suffered with ADD, or you've used it as a superpower or as a super negative, depends on how you kind of frame it and choose to work with it. But, when I first kind of started my businesses, I had a construction company and was trying to do several things all at once, failed that business. I had, a brief corporate stint for a short period of time. And when I finally came back around to All Clean and had my window cleaning and cleaning business in 2012, I still had many business ideas. And it was actually something that held me back for a couple of years. And it wasn't really until I put off everything else and just hyper focused on just one that I started to see, a tremendous amount of success kind of take off in that business. And it was kind of the discipline that I needed at that stage in life to learn how to put systems in place, learn how to put people in place to where a business could run on its own without me, that would then free me up the ability to be able to go and, try other entrepreneurial endeavors and other complementary and, businesses and kind of make sure that they were all kind of tied together. But it didn't happen overnight. That's for sure.
So I want to peel back a couple layers here because I find it fascinating. I know how swamped I am. I've got a couple businesses myself.
Yeah.
And it's hard to balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through what it takes to bring on somebody to run one of your businesses. So let's talk about Wise Coatings, because that one's familiar to me. In fact, before I even go down that path, can you explain to everybody what is Wise Coatings, how you came up with it, and kind of where you are today?
Yeah. So it actually started off as a YouTube channel. So I had built my exterior cleaning company in 2012 from 0 employees to about 70 employees over the course of about 5.5 years. Exited that company in 2018, end of 2018, and then launched Conquer in January of 2019. And Conquer is a business coaching company. We have 40 plus certified coaches that work with our clients, help them systemize and kind of grow their businesses, lots of content and libraries there. But one of the things that always kind of bothered me was, I'll be honest with you, that the Facebook posts kind of stuck with me, where people are like, those who can't do teach. And Brandon couldn't cut it in his own service business. And so that's why he's coaching now. And really, my heart to coach was, I couldn't turn it off. It was so fulfilling. It was so rewarding to take people and help them see success in their business and take their first family vacations. But it got to me. I'm not going to lie. Some of those comments really kind of stung and hurt and made me say, well, screw it. I'm going to start another company and I'm going to show and document how quickly we could scale it from 0 to $1 million company, because I was positive I could do it way faster than I did it with All Clean. So brainstormed, started a YouTube channel, hired a videographer, recorded 16 episodes documenting this search for starting this new service business that I had no experience with previously. Wouldn't use any contacts that I had in the area, would be completely hands off from day one, and settled on garage floor coatings and picked the brand, picked our unique selling propositions, built the budget, built the marketing plan, launched everything. And we went from 0 to $100,000 a month in 4 months. So month 4, we did 6 figures, and then we hit our first million. And then we started expanding and actually franchised it in about month 6. And now we have 15 locations across the country, and we're doing a little over $600,000 a month right now across all the businesses. And we're adding about 2 locations a month right now. But it just started just from an idea of, hey, I want to start something that I could build that doesn't have me doing the day-to-day operations. And really, that's the biggest bottleneck of any business, is the CEO and the person that starts the business. Who are the people on the team to be able to kind of lead that charge? So the whole journey of kind of starting that business was really centered around, how do I find the right people and how do I get them onto the team? And that's that same strategy and approach. It's pretty much the only game that I play right now in business is, how do I find the talent and how do I attract those people onto my team?
That's fascinating. When you're talking about, let's keep that thought going there. When you're attracting the right talent to your organization, how involved are you in the early onboarding to training them your way of doing the business versus giving them the tools and the keys and asking them to go figure it out and have the aptitude to go learn and do? Or are you of a mindset that says, no, I'm going to build the perfect process and the perfect playbook, and I'm going to give it to them and expect them to execute it? How do you visualize that?
It's a good question. One of the quotes that has always resounded really well with me is Steve Jobs, and pretty smart business guy, someone who, I looked up to aspirationally from an entrepreneur. And he said that he doesn't hire people so that he has to tell them what to do. He hires smart people so that they tell him what to do. And early on in my career with All Clean, as I was kind of growing that business, I always hired people with no experience. I would take my technicians and I would promote them to a manager, and they had no management experience. And then I had to be the one to teach them how to manage and how to, come up with the systems and the frameworks and the structures. And while that was a good learning exercise for me to just learn how to coach and build up people, I frequently found that I was the bottleneck, because now I had a whole team of people that were constantly coming to me with, okay, now what do I do? Okay, how do I do this? Well, how do I do that? And I was the answer guy to everything. So there's a point in the business, and it doesn't necessarily have to be from day one, but there's a point in the business to where, to get to that next level, you have to bring in people that know how to do the things that you don't know how to do. And the more I've done business and the more entrepreneurial endeavors I've had, the more I realize I know very little about a lot of things. And once you start getting some experience, there's a really good exercise or a really good representation of this. Is called the Dunning-Kruger curve. And it kind of looks like this. I don't know if you can see this on my screen, but this axis right here represents your knowledge, how much you know. And this represents your confidence. So when you know next to nothing, you have very low confidence. As soon as you learn some stuff and you kind of get here, your confidence shoots way up. And this up here is called Child's Hill. And you're like, I know everything, employees are terrible and stay small and never grow. And, word of mouth referrals is the only way that you should be growing your business. And then like, as soon as you start growing a little bit more and get more knowledge on what it's like to be a business owner and entrepreneur, you come down into here, which is called the valley of despair, and your confidence level kind of drops way down. And then it takes a long, arduous journey. And it's probably more like this all the way up to where you start feeling a little bit more confident. And for me, that's what my journey has been with growing my business. Is the longer I do this, the more I realize how much more experience and how much more knowledge other people have in their specialties and what they do. So now I really focus on finding those people that, hey, I don't have to figure out how to build my business from 5 million to 50 million. I want to go out and hire someone who has done that, 8 times before and knows exactly the blueprint and the playbook. And I want to hire them, and I want to incentivize them to come in to be able to, do that. And we have a good vision. We have a good product. We have a good offering. They know how to take it and scale it. So now I'm going to get them in. And so it's definitely been a mindset shift that I've had over the years that has been kind of that epiphany for me after I've tumbled down into the valley of despair. And it's one that I always kind of keep making sure and checking on myself to make sure that I'm thinking in that mindset.
That's awesome. I'm going to give you a big fat softball here in a second to hit a home run with.
Good
question. But before I do, there's a quote that I've heard before, and I don't know the source of it, but it's the quickest way to get to where you want to go is to find someone that's already been there.
Yeah.
And I think that's your point, right? Is you don't go out and hire somebody on Child's Hill. You hire someone that's gone through that arduous process where their knowledge and their confidence has already gone through that process. And I love that visualization. So here's my giant softball pitch to you, Brandon. How do you know they're not on Child's Hill as opposed to they're further into their knowledge timeline? Because oftentimes there is that absolutely blanket of fake knowledge that comes across a lot of people, and a lot of small business owners get excited about the passion, the energy, both of you and I have blue eyes. So we'll say the blue eyes of whatever it is. Like there's something that gets them to hire the wrong person. How do they prevent that?
Well, first of all, you have to be humble. Humility is an absolute must in growing a business. And, I've seen speakers on stage that never sit in the audience. And to me, that's always so interesting that the speakers that I respect the most, Tommy Mello is a classic example of someone who has a $300 million business, and he sits in the audience and he goes to classes and he listens and he reads books. And this is someone who you could say, Tommy knows, he knows about business. He's doing okay, but he never stops learning. He never stops pretending and, acting like he's still in that valley of despair, and doesn't let himself get his confidence level too high to where he says, I don't need to learn anymore. So I think a good benchmark and test is to just ask yourself, where's my confidence level at? Where is it at? And the reality is that the world is always changing. We have AI now that's completely disrupted the game. And there's things like this that are happening on a regular basis where stuff is just constantly getting disrupted. So there's always room for you to look uphill, and there's always people that'll help you take where you need to go. There's always a place that you haven't been yet, always, no matter where you're at in life. And so, being able to constantly be looking upward for others that have kind of been there, to me, it's just a critical part of growth and allowing yourself to be uncomfortable.
How do you compensate for this? Like when you're deciding to hire a leader to run a division of your company, if you're a small business owner right now and you're going, I need to bring in a GM to run this branch or this location to give me that time to go explore and either start my next company or add another division. How do you look at compensation? And because you said you got to incentivize them the right way. Are we talking equity? Are we talking bonus structures? How big of a carrot and leash do you typically offer?
Yeah, great question. So I always tie everything to performance pay and performance metrics and have KPIs that are directly tied to that. Whatever the incentive is, whatever the, that level of program is. If it's a production manager, I'm going to tie him to our gross margin in our company, our gross margin percentage. And if he hits certain benchmarks, he's going to get bonuses that are tied to, keeping those cogs really, really small and tight. If I'm going to hire someone like a CEO or an executive, I may offer an equity vesting schedule to say, hey, you come into the business and you're able to kind of get us from here to here. We're going to have benchmarks based upon, certain EBITDA targets. And if we hit those EBITDA targets, then equity can unlock, whether it's a vesting option or it's an option or it's a grant, either one of those two ways. And the right person will come in and, of course, salary is a component of that, but a good employee is never a liability. They're always an asset. They're always an investment that gives you a return on that investment. Case in point, there's an HVAC salesperson that I met that makes $1 million per year in commissions.
Oh,
He sells $12 million a year for his company. Now, if you're an HVAC person listening to this call, or just imagine yourself as an HVAC business owner, imagine if you had one salesperson that you knew could bring in $12 million a year into your business, would you pay him $1 million, which is less than 10%? Yeah. So
well,
it's,
to your point,
it's one of those things.
I don't think anyone would say no to that, but I think 90% of the business owners out there would say no to that because of the fear of the unknown.
And certainly you're not going out there and telling someone, hey, I'm going to pay you $1 million a year and hope you bring in 12 million. Yeah. But you can, tie together those incentive programs to where once your goals, the employees' goals are aligned with your goals, and they have full reign and control of being able to hit those targets for you. And then in kind, you'll be able to compensate what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah. That's a Zig Ziglar approach, right? Help other people get what they want and you'll get what you want. And if you look at it in verse, then you'll never get what you want. Right. So you're always going, right? You find that next GM, you find the next leader to help kind of run the company that you're working for. And I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but you give them the tools so they can build the framework to optimize and grow the business. You're not necessarily coming in and micromanaging and saying what they have to do. They've got enough of a carrot and a knowledge base that they go figure it out because they want what's on the other side. But how do you not get complacent? Help me understand that, Brandon, because I think there's a lot of businesses out there or business owners. They get to 2, they get to 3 businesses, and that's a lot to handle. There's a lot of reporting. There's a lot of meetings and check-ins that they've got to kind of do. How do you keep that growth engine going so that you keep going?
So for us, one of the requirements that we have in any one of my businesses is really detailed, in-depth instrumentation. So what I mean by that is very detailed dashboards. So on our dashboards for one of my company, we have cost per lead, customer acquisition cost for every single one of our channels. What percentage of our marketing spend and our acquisition is being allocated across those? What's our forecasted versus our actuals? And are we pacing to hit our goal for the month? So every business knows exactly what the monthly targets are. We track them daily, what our progress is for that. So me as an executive, I can go to one single location, me as the owner, and I can look at the health of my business. What's the net profit at? What are the COGS at? What's the revenue per hour at? What's our fix-it rate and callback rate? What's our churn rate? All of those different types of numbers. I basically either will spend my time setting those up or working with my executive team to make sure that they're setting it up, and then we're reviewing it and making sure that it's kind of optimized, because you have to inspect what you expect. You cannot do delegation by abdication, where you bring in a seasoned executive and you're like, okay, great. You got this. You got it. You're going to help. Okay. Go get him, Tiger. There's locks on doors to keep honest people honest. Locks are not on doors to keep the criminals out, really, because criminals can break in anyways. They'll figure out another way. They can pick the lock. They can break the window. But putting locks on your doors keeps your honest employees honest and holds them accountable, and make sure that they understand that they're being watched. And it removes a lot of temptation away for them to either slack off, be complacent, or, let things slide, or, potentially be a bad actor in your company. So that's a really important part at being able to manage, multiple business streams.
Yeah, I love that. I think reporting is absolutely critical. I mean, you mentioned CPL, you mentioned a couple numbers there. What is your one number? What is the Brandon Vaughn number that you tend to gravitate to look at first?
Ooh, that's a great question. And one I don't like to answer because there's not one. I mean, but at the end of the day, revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. So, the whole reason why a business exists is to produce cash. So EBITDA is probably the number, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So it's basically your net profit on your profit and loss with those things added back in. Interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization expenses, those get added back into it. So that gives you your EBITDA number. And the reason why I like that number is because that gives me a sense of how valuable the company is as an asset. And is it generating free cash flow? Is it producing profit? Because at the end of the day, if you have a business that's not producing profit, why do you have it at all? It's the only reason why you should have it. So that's probably one of the biggest numbers. If I was to pick anything, I'd say I'd probably pick that one.
I love it. You didn't ask, but I'm going to give it to you. My favorite number is I came across this metric about 3 years ago as your LER, your labor efficiency ratio. And
Like revenue per employee?
Yep, you calculate it, but it's and you can break it into categories. Are they revenue producing employees or are they production employees? And you're trying to figure out what the kind of revenue per hour that they're in charge of. Sales might be a different number than operations. And then you can kind of have a blended company overview that kind of pulls all those numbers together to see kind of what your ratio looks like. And anything at a 3 or higher is super healthy. And sometimes if I see it's a 6 or a 7, I actually feel like I'm too fat and I'll bring other people in. And it tells me that people might be being overworked as well. And you have a chance of them walking off the job. So
right.
to me, I like the LER because I think everything else kind of falls in line from there. But EBITDA is in your net margin is phenomenal. I have a good question that came in. I'm not going to save it to the end because I think it's super applicable, but thank you, Garrett, for putting this question in. But what do you do when a GM or a leader kind of walks off the job? Maybe today is all about this churning of employees, the quiet quitting, you have a top leader, you have a lot of trust in, you've given them your baby. When they walk off, how do you approach that? Do you come in or do you kind of do next man up?
Well, I have a philosophy that I share with every single employee that I bring onto my team, and that is that everyone is replaceable in my company, and they have to ensure that they're replaceable in their company. And the reason why I do that is, first of all, if you're ever going to be promoted into any other type of a role, you better be able to have a good succession plan where someone can come in and replace you and do just as good of a job as you. So I have that for my lead technicians, for my assistant technicians, for my production managers, for my director of operations, all the way up to even potentially CEO. And so what we mean by that is that they have to document all of their day-to-day processes, make sure it's an easy, digestible format, all of their files, their resources, everything that they save, they're saving into the cloud inside of our shared drives. There's nothing that's living in their My Drives or nothing that's living on their desktops or in their laptops. So that's our mantra. That's one of our core things that we are constantly hammering on all the time, is that you have to be replaceable. And it resounds very, very well for people because we don't want someone to feel like this is the only job that they're ever going to be in. They want to level up and they want to be able to have that opportunity to have other people come in. So when we have turnover and churn, we definitely don't like it. We definitely miss especially high performers that end up churning. We typically, for people like GMs and CEOs, the nice thing about sharing equity is that it can be a little bit more of a golden handcuff in some ways, whether that's a vesting schedule that vests after 4 or 5 years, or if it's something that, is built into your operating agreement that if someone exits early, they're going to devalue their equity, the value of their equity, to 10 cents on the dollar. There's lots of different ways you can draft your operating agreements to minimize that. And having those conversations with your people up front mean there's no surprises later on. They understand what they're signing up for, what they're doing. So I've had extremely minimal churn in my executive teams because we fight up front about all that stuff, and they have a very clear understanding from day one. So, that when someone does inevitably at some point churn, we'll hopefully have the ability to be able to just get the job ads back up again, potentially look internally to see if someone can step into that role, or just bring in another outside hire to replace them. And here's the interesting thing. The more interviews that I've done, the more people I've talked to, the more comfortable I actually am that anyone in your company is replaceable, including yourself as the CEO. In fact, there's probably a lot better people that could run your company instead of, you as CEO. And that's a lesson that took me years to fully understand and grasp. It's one of the best epiphanies that I had about myself personally. Now there's people that are 100% suited very well to be CEO of their companies. But we always have to figure out how we can be replaceable if need be. If something happens to us, we get sick, someone in our family gets sick, we got to step aside. We can't have everything rely upon us as the bottleneck or anyone on our team as the bottleneck.
I really like that a lot. And I think employees respect that too. I had not thought about the position where you said, we want you to be replaceable in the sense that you're going to be growing up in the company and we want someone to come in and be able to take over your responsibilities so you can move on and continue to grow and expand into other areas. But the way I've kind of framed it in the past is everything we want to be duplicatable. So when we start expanding and growing and we need to add on an additional customer success rep, or we need to add on an extra account executive, we can easily have somebody jump in. And
I like that.
You're doing.
I like the word duplicatable better than replaceable. I think I'll probably steal that from you, Ryan.
It's all about the twist.
I like it.
I love this conversation where it's going. It's certainly going a little bit deeper than I actually anticipated. But as we kind of keep talking about efficiencies and we talk about thinking of people, walk me through kind of that training process. So when you do bring in a GM, can you talk to me about the kind of the first 30, 60, 90 days and how you set that up?
Yeah. So one of the first things that we do is we use HireBus. So we have an assessment tool. It's actually one of the coolest assessments that I've ever seen. It's a one single question assessment that basically identifies 21 different behavioral attributes of a candidate and then has benchmarks for CEO, GM, office manager, production manager, lead technician, like all the home service roles. There's benchmarks for it. So before we even hire someone, like our last round that we did, we had 204 applicants and we ran the ads through Viva HR, by the way.
Bless your heart.
Ran the ads through that. So we had all the people come in, 204 applicants came through. We went ahead and sent all of them immediately over to our application. And then we had a little bit of a drop off. And then we had all of them do the HireBus assessments. And then we only picked people that scored 8s or 8 through 10s. We just disqualified everybody else. And then I got us our little short list of 14 interviews. And we did those 14 interviews. I did those in a day and a half. And I had a second round of interviews for our final 3, scored all of them. And then when we brought them on board, really there's not a whole lot of training that we necessarily had to do other than just they're inheriting a bunch of new direct reports. So I kind of charge them with kind of putting together what that program looks like for them to be able to get oriented, because they're going to be, meeting with their direct reports and letting them know that they're in charge. And really the encouragement that I give them is, hey, you got to start out of the front lines of whatever we're doing and get a deep understanding of what that is. Get on calls with customers, understand what their pain points are. And I kind of don't want to box them too much into, okay, here's what you need to do, because I want them to bring their fresh perspective, because part of the reason why I'm hiring them is for their talent that they can inject into the business. And I don't want to just box and say, okay, here's all the things you do day to day. Here's all the steps you do. There's like a combination of both of that. Here's what I expect of you. And then now here's what I expect you to bring to the table. And then we'll get together and we'll figure out if they're aligned, and I still vet things to make sure that they're good fits for our company before someone just decides to, make drastic changes in our company. And really, I take more of a coaching role with my GMs and my executive team. So just, how can I support you? How can I help you? How can we solve your problems? How can we give you more work-life balance? And typically those things kind of solve themselves.
What is your meeting cadence with those leaders?
Once a week.
Once a week?
Yeah, an hour a week. Mm-hmm.
I know you do the Conquer program, obviously, but if you dive into the EOS framework, does it follow a similar kind of meeting
Oh
cadence?
yeah. Yeah, very, very much. I'm a huge Gino Wickman fan, love
Yeah.
traction, love EOS, love rocket fuel. And it's very, very similar. EOS is the general purpose entrepreneurial operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Basically took that and we translated it specifically for home service businesses under our MAPS framework. But it's very, very similar. We use a lot of very similar language and all the fundamental principles and meeting cadences, level 10s, that kind of stuff. It's a big part of it for sure.
Are you doing monthly goals, quarterly goals? How are you looking at goals? And I say that because I want you to explain to people the importance of goals. I know you do goals, but I feel like as I've talked to other entrepreneurs, that's something that's really missing. It's more of just like we're working day to day, week to week. How
Right.
do you approach goals, and especially from a top level standpoint, and then hold them accountable when your GM misses the goal 3 times in a row? What do those conversations look like?
He's getting fired. No, I'm just kidding. Typically what we do is it's a very, when you have GMs and you have executives on your team, goal setting has to be a collaborative exercise. It cannot be okay, here's what your goals are, without understanding the math, whether or not it's possible, having the ability to be able to provide feedback. Because if they're not bought in, this is where I really love Simon Sinek and his start with why philosophy. If they're not bought in, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for them to achieve those goals in the first place. And if they don't achieve them, they'll say, well, it was not reasonable in the first place. And it won't be any accountability on why they failed. It'll be that you set the wrong goal. So what we typically do is we look at a macro and then we dive all the way down into the micro. So we'll typically start out with, okay, what's our 5-year, what's our 10-year plan look like? And I'm talking one single Excel spreadsheet that has very simple math with percentages of growth, what EBITDA targets we're looking at, what multiples will look like, what that kind of 5 to 10 year, mark looks like. And then we'll dial it all the way back down to, okay, what's the next 2 years look like? And we have an itemized P&L budget that has revenue targets. We put together cohort tables and have forecasted cohort tables along with which hires we need to have to be able to support that. And we get so granular down to it to where we can take a look at a plan and we say, hey, if we follow this plan to a T, this is exactly how much cash we'll have sitting in our bank account at the end of the year. So a lot of it really is centered around financial planning and financial modeling, because I learned a while ago that math is the path. And for me, the softest pillow is a good budget. I can sleep so soundly at night when I got a good budget to lay my head on and fluff up and just be like, okay, we know what's happening.
Why cash is right there.
Yeah. And then we look at it, we break down our larger rocks of, big projects we want to do. And then we break them down into smaller goals, so that we just know on a weekly basis, are we trending towards it or are we missing it? There's a really great book called The 12-Week Year that has some really good goal setting exercises. It's by Brian Moran. He spoke at one of our Conquer Summits here a couple of years ago. And just a really good way, instead of looking at annual planning, you basically, look at the concept of periodization, which is taking much smaller bite-sized pieces of time, like for instance, pretending that your year is 12 weeks instead of 12 months and kind of like framing it up that way. And we've seen a lot of good success with kind of following some of those principles too.
Well, that would accelerate it if you get hyper focused into 12-week tranches, right?
But we know if we're going to hit a goal, when we're only 20% towards hitting that target, because we take a look at pacing very, very closely. And we even do this, like we have our monthly goal. We have, okay, here's what our goal of enrollments is, for instance, for my SaaS company. Here's our goal of enrollments. Here's what our actuals are, and it's updated live through instrumentation. And then we count up the net working days, and then we infer what the pacing number looks like. Do we know if we're pacing ahead of goal or behind goal? So even just having that optics and being like, oh my gosh, we're pacing behind. It increases the sense of urgency. It has the team take a look at, okay, how do we pivot? How do we adjust to be able to hit that enrollment goal? And that tracking is what helps the goals actually get hit. And it feels a little bit like predicting the future when you start kind of optimizing it and looking at it from a math perspective.
I love that. Let's jump into talk a little bit more about Wise Codings, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
My question is, why would anyone not buy into this franchise if they get access to Brandon Vaughn? Like, why would somebody not do it?
Well, I will say it's not that they get access to Brandon Vaughn. We built something that's much, much bigger than me, so like, for instance, all the systems are done from day one, all of the, onboarding and training systems and everything else. It's not like, because Brandon Vaughn has limited capacity, right? I have only so many hours in the week. And if we have 300 locations, not everyone gets access to Brandon Vaughn. And that's kind of the point. Us as business owners, we have to kind of create those things that are bigger than ourselves so that we aren't the bottleneck. And, the biggest reason, we've done comparison studies of, if someone was to go out and start a floor coating business from day one, they're going to pay close to $80,000 from day one to get everything that we have set up. Our training videos, for every single position in the company, all of our systems done, the branding, the wraps, the collateral, the website, the SEO. Like, when you take a look at the full stack of what it is we provide, it's about 80 grand to have apples for apples comparison. And it's about $9,000 a month in ongoing, as far as the ongoing support. We pay for the CRM, the bookkeeping, QuickBooks, Google Workspace, inventory management software. We pay for Gusto. We pay for Facebook ad management, Google ad management, SEO. As the franchisee or as the franchisor, we pay for all those things. So like, when you look at it apples to apples from a financial sense, it makes total sense. I'm like, wow, it's a lot cheaper, and we can collapse time and not have to spend 2 years building all this same equivalent stuff. But some people really want to have their own brand, and they emotionally want to have like that control, and they don't want to follow a system. They want to create their own systems. And then it's not for everybody. We've talked to people, and those are typically the ones where they decide they want to just kind of go their own path, because they're like, yeah, I get all that, but you know what? I just want to make my own thing and then get my own lumps and bumps and bruises and just kind of go about it. The people that we found that are getting attracted into our business are ones where, they've either never owned a business before, and they're very scared to hop in. And those are the ones that's like, this is a no-brainer. The ones that we find are typically resistant. They've either already built their own business, and maybe they're kind of struggling. They're not exactly hitting the sweet spot, but it's just really hard to just follow someone else's system when they're used to kind of creating exactly what it is that they want to do. So it's not for everybody. But from a financial perspective, it's kind of a no-brainer.
I bet that's really exciting to see the different personalities in different markets, and what works and what doesn't work. Is there a couple of things that, just in your general observations over the last 15 locations, 15 different markets as well, I'm assuming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some of those observations you've made on what's worked well in those markets, going from people to even neighborhoods? I don't know anything you've kind of noticed.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that we have a pretty diverse range of franchisees. We have people that, we have a couple that have built their own 7-figure home service business, and they use this as kind of like a bolt-on complementary business where they're like cross-selling to each other, which has been successful. But then we have people that ex-mortgage brokers and ex-insurance, agency owners. And we have one guy that was a pharmacist for 25 years. Wow. And we have another one that was in medical sales. And they're just unbelievable people. Again, we use HireBus to benchmark, what's their submission levels, what's their change levels, what's their proactivity, their dominance, their aggression, so that we get a good understanding on, what's the avatar of the person that works really well with the franchise environment. You don't want someone that's super aggressive and like zero submission to come into a franchise system, because they won't want to follow anything, and then they'll fight you about it. And that's like causes conflict. So we've learned some, little things like that. Then what we do is we take a look at demographics. So before we open up any territory, we do a huge demographic survey of all the zip codes, look at demographics, psychographics, median home value, ratio of owners to renters, competitors in the area, market saturation, number of households, all these different demographics. And we kind of like put together this perfect little territory for a franchisee. And then we have national marketing efforts. So we've tested in all these different markets exactly what's working and converting for getting leads coming in. And so it's very easy to just apply that across all of the companies as if it's one single company, which is really cool. So if a franchisee is doing something unique in their area, it's working really well, like boom, we can roll it out to absolutely everybody. So it's just this really awesome collaborative environment, and our partners are incredible. They're always coming up with cool new stuff that we're implementing. And it's been a blast, man. It's been stressful for sure. I'm not going to lie. I've never done a franchise company before. So I've learned a lot about the FTC and about federal mandated audits that you have to have, and publishing your P&Ls publicly. This public record and public domain. There's just so many things that, I've like been like, wow, I didn't know that. But it's a blast. And I have an amazing partner that's helped me through all that stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm rooting for you here on the sidelines. I praise your names as much as I can. And I'm really excited to, every time I hear of another venture, another brand that's kind of popping up with your name on it, I love it. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I'm going to wrap up, Brandon, and I just want to say again, thank you for taking the time to be on here. I want to end with one question though. Learning is a big part of your life. I know that. I know that you study a lot. You love to just absorb content and educational resources. Can you give everyone a sense of, like, if there's one event? I know there's always a lot of noise around going to events and trade shows and expos. But is there one in particular that stands out that you feel like has been just a really good fabric to go and learn the meat and potatoes of growing and building a business?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug the Conquer Summit, because our once a year event's off the hook. But that's just for Conquer members. Boy, that's a tough question. There's a lot of amazing events depending on what industry you're in. So if you're in home services, I'd say first connect with your local network of get around other business owners that are doing the same type of work as you and make those good connections. Any event where you can go and you can network and rub shoulders and talk to people and sit down and just pick each other's brains. I like the events where people are masterminding together a lot better than just the talking heads up on stage. Because to me, the most amount of value I've ever gotten from any event I've gone to has been from mastermind style events. I was part of a mastermind group that was 25 grand, part of a mastermind group that was 50 grand. Right now I'm paying 10 grand a month to get coaching and be a part of a mastermind group. And the more that I've paid for it, the higher level of caliber of individual that's there, to where, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I feel like an idiot going into these rooms, talking to these people with their knowledge, and just, I find that the more uncomfortable I can make myself at these types of events, the better it is. Which is kind of why we created Conquer in the first place, was to kind of provide that level of experience ongoing, rather than just, a few times a year. Literally every week you're getting together with a coach. So any type of in-person events, now that COVID's lifted, get back out there. Any investment that you can make to go to an in-person event is going to pay you back in spades. It's incredible.
Awesome. Love it. Great advice, by the way. All right, Brandon, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Ryan. See you guys later.
Thank you.